Welcome to the Marketing Meeting podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jantsch. He's a pioneer in fractional CMO leadership, a speaker, and a best-selling author. And he's also the podcast host for one of the best podcasts that I follow a lot, which is Duct Marketing. And you are also the founder of the Duct Marketing Agency Network. Welcome, John.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Could you tell a bit about the Duct Marketing Agency Network? Because we're going to talk a lot about that actually during the podcast.
So I have to tell you a little history. I started my own agency about 30 years ago, and really kind of a traditional agency. I just hustled whatever work I could get. And at some point I found that I really liked working with smaller companies, but it was kind of challenging. I mean, they had the same needs, never the same budgets, not even the same attention span, really. And so I decided I needed to create a very systematic approach, a unique approach to marketing, where I could walk in and say, look, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here are the results we hope to get. And here's what it costs. Do you want it or not? And I found out pretty quickly that really trying to address my need, my frustration, I tapped into what is still today probably one of the greatest frustrations for many small and mid-sized businesses. It's hard to buy marketing services and getting harder. Everybody's selling a piece of the pie. There's a new platform every week. And so what I think happened is I started writing about that, and I did put kind of my system in my first book. I started attracting other consultants and agencies with that same frustration. They said, hey, yeah, we need to have marketing as a system. We need to be able to walk in and install this system, and we really love your approach. So I started licensing it to other consultants, probably coming up on 15 years now. And we've had about 400 agencies and consultants go through our program. We license them and certify them to use our materials and our approach and our frameworks. And then about a fourth of them actually participate pretty actively as a community and network and collaborate as well.
I've been doing the fractional CMO role for 7 years, which you have almost like double the amount of that for a long time. For people who are not very familiar with this, could you please explain what a fractional CMO is, and especially what type of companies a fractional CMO suits to?
So again, I have to give a little history because I think it's changed a lot. It's the idea of a fractional CMO, somebody hiring a part-time, person who might work for some other folks as opposed to bringing in a full-time CMO. That idea has actually been around quite a while. But I think what's really happened is it's exploded both in kind of its definition and application dramatically the last 5 years or so. I think people have realized fractional everything is okay. Whatever role could be done as a fractional. People are very comfortable with working with people that never come and sit in their office, that are completely doing virtual work. And so it's really kind of opened the doors, I think, for a lot of people to really call themselves fractional CMOs, but because the market has really accepted that term. In its essence, what it is a part-time, marketing leader who would be bring in to develop and maybe direct strategy, but not necessarily do the work. Like a lot of times, they'll either bring in agency partners, or they will work with who's there on staff, or maybe they'll help them build a marketing team of what I would call doers. But essentially what a fractional CMO provides for a lot of organizations is marketing leadership, because there really isn't anyone who's directly responsible for that full function of marketing.
Mm-hmm. Is this an ideal scenario where you have a fractional CMO in place, you have a company and you hire a fractional CMO in place, but you don't have a proper marketing team in place?
Yeah.
Because that happened to me. So that's why I would like to ask your thoughts on that.
Well, sure. As a fractional CMO, it's kind of dangerous because the bottom line is, regardless of what you call yourself, they want you to do everything if you can. And I've seen a lot of well-meaning fractional CMOs get kind of sucked into that. And next thing they know, they're really just selling their time, and they're really just another consultant. They're not really providing that marketing leadership. I mean, if you think about traditional structuring an organization, a CMO is not writing the emails for the campaign, but it's very easy to get sucked into that because, there's nobody to do it. Right. So, one of the things that I think, what we're trying to bring to the world, I think a little bit is that you need to have a system, you need to have scope so that you actually can walk in and say, look, here is what I'm going to do rather than what do you need me to do?
Okay.
Here's the approach I'm going to do. Here's how we're going to do strategy. I've done it this time. I've done it that time. I can do it for you. And, I think where people really get in a bad situation is when they just walk in and treat every engagement as something they have to figure out and customize, because it is very easy to get drawn in and be doing more than you should be doing. So we really structured as even phases because a lot of times there are foundational things that need to be fixed. They don't have a team in place, so we're going to develop the system around what's going to be done. Then we're going to help them find who's going to do it, or we'll partner with an agency that's going to do it. But you really, if you're truly going to be an effective fractional CMO and not go crazy, you really have to have that definition of here's what I do and here's what I don't do, and that that's really very, very clear. And the way you do it is by saying here is our framework that we know works.
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, to what extent should a fractional CMO involve themselves in a client's existing marketing team and processes, which is like the daily, day-to-day work and so on?
Well, I think if you, and again, I don't know if you've worked in a large organization, but you imagine, we're in a traditional organization, they bring in a new CMO. Well, that person is going to want to meet with everybody, is going to want to see like, what's the baseline? What are we doing now? What's been working? What's not working? What's being measured? How do I get hold of data? So they really, even the fractional, and that's where sometimes people make a mistake is they come in and they either feel some resistance or they feel like they don't have permission to say, I need to see the P&L. I need to see what the marketing budget is. I need, just like you would in any organization as a true CMO, you really have to exert that role, and you can't really wait for them because a lot of people that hire fractional CMOs, it's the first time they've done it. And they don't really know how to work with you either. And so you really need to go in and lead them and tell them what you need, and show them why it's important that you are embedded in the business in a way that allows you to advocate for the customer, that allows you to really advocate for marketing.
So the first step would be like define the scope of work and how much you're going to get involved, and then get into the place. But as a first step in your model, time arrangement is one thing, because that's the hardest thing that I find as a fractional CMO is to manage my time.
Yes.
So because it can easily go, because marketing is sometimes 7/24, you can have an issue on Monday night or Sunday night even, and then you need to pick up the phone. What's the ideal time in a week that you see? Of course, it changes from project to project, but usually how many days a week or what's the amount of time a fractional CMO should spend?
So it depends greatly on your model, your business model, what you want to do, what you want your business to look like. And if you go in the traditional model and you are essentially saying, I can give you a day a week or 2 hours a day or something, well, you're eventually going to sell all your time. You're going to have 4 clients and you're going to be maxed out. And maybe you'll be paid well for your time, but it's very difficult to grow a business that way. And so what we try to teach people to do is that you have a very set scope, and it doesn't really matter what time you are putting into it. It's the result. Here's what we are going to deliver. So for instance, with us, every client that we bring in goes through something we call strategy first. They are hiring us to be their fractional CMO, but we are actually going to develop a marketing strategy. It's going to take the first 60 days, is going to be very defined. What we do is very defined. What we need from them is very defined. And so we're not looking at it as, I'm going to give you, 10 hours a week, because what happens is then they just think, okay, I've got this bank of 10 hours. How can I use them? And so you get sucked into everything. But when we tell them, no, you don't get time from us, you get a result. And that result is going to be X, Y, and Z and spelled out, and they know exactly what they're paying for it. What it allows us to do is to actually teach others to do many steps in the process, to delegate a great deal of the work so that we can actually scale that model, call ourselves fractional CMOs, but still have 10, 12, 15 clients because we're using account managers and we're using project managers as part of the work as well.
Okay, so yeah, in that sense, in your model, a fractional CMO should have some people in the team.
100%.
And those people are hired by the company or the fractional CMO itself?
Well,
himself?
again, there are many, many ways to do it. The way we structured it is they are actually on our team. Now, if somebody came to us and said, "Hey, I want you to build me a marketing department," fine, I'll do it. I'll tell you what roles need to be and the type of person needs to be in those roles, and I'll actually even work to recruit those people for you, and then I'll manage them. We've certainly done that as well, and of course. You haven't mentioned AI yet, but but AI is going to end up on the org chart, for a lot of people. So now, kind of the company of the future is going to be maybe marketing managers who are actually managing several AI agents for very specific tasks.
What are some of the roles, like in a medium-sized company, for example, what are some of the additional roles that the fractional CMO gets next to him or herself, which is like, there's a fractional CMO, is there like a coordinator, a project manager? What are some common roles?
So in our role, we have an account manager and a project manager. So, and it's kind of like a typical agency structure. The fractional CMO stays very strategic. The account manager has a lot of contact with the client and keeps things moving forward. And then the project manager quite often is managing the fact that we might be working with a lot of strategic partners who are doing the work of, maybe web design or creating content. So that's kind of how we structure it. And we found that what it does is by having those definition of roles, what ends up happening is somebody feels like they get a team, but also as the fractional CMO, I'm not constantly worried about some of the little tasks, and tactics that need to be done all the time, because that truly is what happens when you don't have that structure. Is you're going to get sucked back into everything because you're the only point of contact. So at the very least, I would tell fractional CMOs that they need to hire, depending upon their client load, they need to hire one or two, virtual assistants, if nothing else, somebody that is really kind of keeping things moving, because as the fractional CMO, figuring out how to do more with your existing clients, get new clients, and do strategy work is really all you have time for. And so you definitely want to make sure that you have people that you're not worrying about sending out invoices. You're not worried about, returning emails or setting up meetings and things like that, because that stuff will suck as much of your valuable time as doing, high payoff work will.
How about those people, for example, if the company has agencies already in place that are doing like the agency work, websites, graphic design and everything, right. And then it's only the company just needs the fractional CMO's headspace on high level stuff, then it would still fractional CMO needs another one on their side, another person on their side for those.
Maybe not. I mean, if you're just offering an advisory type of service, but in my experience, what will happen is once you start offering an advisory service, it's going to become clear that nobody's managing all those other partners and nobody's helping them orchestrate on the strategy. And so you are going to get particularly the more partners and employees and team members they already have involved in marketing, the more you're going to get sucked in, because there's probably, the bigger the number they have of those, the more chaos there is.
Yeah, I'm really happy that I find it on my own way, but it's always strategy first for me, because if someone asks me to jump into, can we get your feedback about the social media? Can we get feedback about our activation plan and so on? I always say, hold on, we need to start with the strategy first, and then we go on the fractional CMO model, because it also helps me to understand if we are a good fit with the company, bracket. So I'm happy that you're already applying it to your network too. What are some of the common pricing models for fractional CMOs?
Well, the most common I think that you see is a retainer. And it is, whatever the numbers are, 5, 10,000. I've heard as high as 25,000, to really be kind of that on call, execute on the plan. In some cases, there are fractional CMOs then who are charging over and above that if we're going to manage team members, or if they're going to actually be responsible for, getting, execution done. So that to me is really the most common. I'm sure there are people out there charging by the hour, but I just can't imagine, that's a very viable model.
And what would you recommend for new fractional CMOs? Because the common question is that how can I secure new clients? How can I get new clients? For people that aren't in your network, let's say, let's start with that. How can they secure new clients?
Well, you think about this role. This is not, it's not a $300 a month, do some SEO tactics for me. I mean, it is, if you're going to do this role right, you're going to have a very deep relationship with the company that you work with. And so hopefully they understand that. And that's why it's so important to position yourself as we're going to do strategy, and it is going to be expensive because it's worth it. That's going to help you attract the right type of client. And so, to me, I think that's really probably the biggest key. This is a high trust type of thing. So it's not a matter of a whole bunch of outreach and automation and, using AI bots and all the things that people are probably trying to sell to you right now to help you attract leads. It really is more of a matter of going out and networking and starting to tell people what you do, tell people how it's different. It really, you almost, I tell people, especially people getting in fractional CMO world, you really only need about 100 contacts that you can continue to work on because every person, whether they are a prospect or not, knows prospects. And so, really spending a lot of time with 50 to 100 people and teaching them what you do, delivering value is how you're going to build that trust, as opposed to just trying to run ads and get meetings. You think about the value that you could bring and how deeply you're going to embed yourself in an organization. I mean, I can't imagine that somebody would hire a fractional CMO because they saw an ad.
Yeah. In your network, did you get the clients and distribute to your network? How does it work?
Yeah. So we do not do that. And largely because everybody is free to do their own model, who they want to work with. Some people are very niched into certain industries. And so we also have an agency as well. So we do, a lot of people come to us because they want to hire us. We certainly have made referrals. There's somebody that's looking for, somebody that specializes in e-commerce or something, and we don't. We make a lot of referrals, but it's certainly not part of the network that you're going to generate leads, from our network.
Which thing worked for you, for your business, to attract new clients? Which is it referrals, or is it your podcast?
Yeah, so it's probably a form of everything, quite frankly, because we're doing a lot of things. But ultimately, especially in the beginning, I spent a lot of time and energy developing relationships with other businesses that had my ideal clients. So software companies and people in the MarTech space. And I would do education. I would do webinars. I would speak on stages, for their audiences. And so it was really a form of referral because they put me in front of their audience. They demonstrated that they trusted me already. And so, that's really the number one way that I still advise folks that, that are selling a high ticket, high trust, service. Can really get in front of the right audiences in the most effective way.
For me, it's a mixture of referral from my past teammates at the companies that I worked with.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, repeating similar topics on LinkedIn, on social. So it's just like you're saying, on top of people's heads.
Yeah.
I cannot say that I get like a lead from LinkedIn at all, nothing. But it's just like I get leads from friends that I have on LinkedIn.
That's
and
right.
usually those people are the people that I've worked with in the past. And I personally couldn't still find out the exact way to attract new clients, to be honest.
Yeah.
I know that some people use services like Clutch, where you list your company over there, but it's a lot of, I think, referral-based task. That's my experience, at least for 7 years.
I agree. I mean, really what you hit on, quite frankly, is the first rule is consistency. You know, if you're not going to get clients because you posted on LinkedIn one time. It's got to be something that you do every day. Spend an hour. I tell people all the time, book an hour every day to work on your own marketing, because you know what happens is you're going to get busy, and then you're going to lose like 2 clients for whatever reason the same day, and now you're like, oh, I have no prospects, I have no pipeline. So you know, working on that every day, even if you feel like, oh, I've got all the business I need, is an extremely important really activity.
Yeah. What's the ideal duration, or is there an ideal duration, let's say, for a fractional CMO?
Yeah, I don't know if there is. I mean, I certainly know fractional CMOs who kind of look at their engagements as, hey, I'm going to come in 6 months, advise, fix, leave. We have clients that we've had for 5-6 years, and they get very attached to what we're doing. We mature their marketing, so it's not just a matter of doing the same thing over and over again. We help them bring new products, new services, new ways to think about their markets, maybe expand it, geography. So there's always more to do, with the right relationship.
Mm-hmm. In the case of as a duration, I'm going to ask one thing, because I mean, when you are working as a fractional CMO or a consultant as a CMO to a company, do you also help them get outsourced expertise, like if they need like services like websites, graphic design, and so on? And does those services go through through the management of your team?
Yeah. So that's how we have chosen to do it. There are a lot of models, but we have relationships with pretty much all kinds of service providers, and we will bring most of those in, but we are managing the relationship, and we are responsible for the result. That happens to be our model. I know a lot of fractional CMOs that look at it as, I'm going to make introductions to this person, this person, this person. They're going to work with you. And I've worked with them in the past. I can help manage them, but you're going to pay them directly. You're going to contract with them directly. Either one works. We've just chosen our model and kind of stick with it.
So it feels like you are acting also as an agency, but also as a team member almost.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably right. We actually even call it a fractional CMO agency that they're hiring. We use that term specifically because we are capable of providing all the execution as well.
I find a unique value about that because, I recognize that founders have some reaction to working with agencies because it feels like, when you're an agency, it feels like you want to sell more and you want to create more services and so on. When it feels like as a fractional CMO, for me, I'm acting as a part of the team. I'm a team member, and I'll get services only if we are needing it. I'm not going to push for getting more services. Just
and a lot of agencies, they do 3 things. And so guess what? That's what they sell. So it's like, rather than looking at it and saying, oh, we need to do more thought leader or more influencer or whatever it is for you, they're focused on, no, we do SEO and content and paid. And so, that's what they bring to everybody. Everybody looks the same as opposed to, saying, hey, what's the right mix here? Let's go out and find the components.
But I mean, do you fix the things that you give as a service?
Yes.
Like, do you say that these are the things that we can help you find services around? Or is it like never ending, like an endless list of things?
It starts to feel like that, but quite frankly, we work with we work with a pretty narrow range, small, mid-sized businesses, probably nobody over $30 million. And so consequently, they need a lot of the same things, at that point. And so we don't do things like, we don't take on, e-commerce businesses, and we don't work with retail or hyper local like restaurants or anything like that. So we work with a lot of professional businesses, professional service businesses, a lot of home service businesses. And so what they need in terms of channels and things are pretty similar.
The reason that you don't work with bigger brands over, let's say, $30 million, is it because that they need their own teams, or there's another reason to that?
It really has more to do with having some focus, narrow focus. I mean, they definitely, they have more structure, you have more meeting, they have more reporting, there's more things, so our system is really focused on helping that company that's kind of still in foundation phase, maybe trying to level up a little bit. That's where we've found that we can make the greatest impact the fastest. And it allows us to, from our own marketing standpoint, to say, here's who makes an ideal client for us. It's not everybody. That's really more of so we've chosen that market because we see a lot of opportunity there, but we also are really good at serving that market.
So for people that are looking into, for marketing people that are looking into transitioning to the fractional CMO model, do you have a few advices that you can give? I mean, where should they start? Is it just start a company or whatever?
The first piece of advice I would say is, don't get hung up on what you call yourself. I talk to a lot of folks that want to do this, and they're like, well, it feels kind of funny calling myself a CMO because I've never been one. And so don't get so hung up on that. The need for marketing leadership is vast. It's immense. So find companies that realize that realize they need strategy, and call yourself whatever you want. The fractional CMO term has really gotten very popular. And so a lot of people have really leaned into that term, but don't let that stop you from going out and doing, this type of practice. The other thing, and it's somewhat self-serving, but either develop your own system or acquire, a system for doing strategy, because it takes a lot of time and experience to develop kind of a framework that works. And so that's really that's the genesis of our business, is that, we've been doing this for 20 years, and we've got a framework that works and that has continued to evolve as technology and trends have continued to evolve. So if you can invest in yourself, that's the fastest way to get going. But if that's not an option, from day one, you don't want to get in this trap of selling your time. So you want to be able to develop a productized approach to how you work with somebody.
Yeah. I wish I had your company when I was starting up, because I recognize that, like, starting with strategy first, or all the things that we have talked, I found my own way through failure and getting up, which made me lose a lot of time. So I think the thing that your agency is doing is, I think, it's quite precious for people not to lose time, to learn, shorten the learning curve, let's say, in my opinion. Is there any other names that people use for fractional CMO? Because I see also like consulting CMO, which sounds a little bit better to me. Although
I've seen people calling themselves marketing strategists. I've seen them call themselves CMO on demand, part-time CMO, part-time marketing department. I've heard people use that term. I always tell people, using a term that you think the market understands, like fractional CMO, makes sense. But the real thing you need to pinpoint is, what problem are you solving for somebody? And because that's what you sell. Or at least that's what people buy. And so figure out a problem that needs to be solved, through whatever it is that you offer, and talk about your service, your product, your business that way.
How do you see the role of marketing evolving in the next few years? Because you are interviewing a lot of people for your podcast, and you are talking a lot about marketing, especially concerning the CMO role as well.
Yeah. So I think we're going to see, I think we're going to see this great divide develop over the next few years. AI is driving a huge wedge in everything that people are doing and thinking, both businesses and marketers. And so I think you're going to see a move towards adoption of AI like crazy. But I think that's going to come with a similar move back to more human, back to more personal driven things. I think you're going to see a return to PR. I think you're going to see a return to direct mail. I think you're going to see a return to some things that aren't going to necessarily be automated by. They might be enhanced by, but not necessarily automated by things like bots and agents and AI. And so the companies that I think really are going to be able to differentiate themselves is they'll harness AI, but they'll also find ways to really build trusted brands in the mind of the consumer. Because the one thing I think as marketers quite often forget about when we get really caught up in all the technology and the changes is that the thing that's, I've been doing this 30 years, and the thing that's changed the most to me is how people choose companies, how people buy today. Yeah. And that's only going to get, even more in their hands, because you think about all the research and all the information that somebody can have before they ever even talk to somebody about engaging them. And I think that divide's going to get larger.
Mm-hmm. Do you see physical retail increasing up?
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I don't know that much about retail. I mean, there's a lot of driving forces. Even real estate is a huge driving force, on that industry. That that who knows what people are going to do. I mean, you start looking at the direct to consumer companies that I ordered something from Amazon the other day and it came in like 3 hours. It's fast. Like, what were they circling the building here? I mean, so so I mean, all those factors, are only going to make it harder for retail for sure.
Yeah. So I'm moving to one of the last questions, which is like, you have a podcast for so many years.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, you are the first podcast that I've started listening to in terms of marketing. I have a podcast, which is like 3 years, and I'm still trying to figure out how to grow it. What's some key practices you found the most effective, let's say?
For growing the podcast?
Yeah, for growing a podcast, yeah.
Well, when I started, it was not that competitive. I mean, our biggest challenge was getting somebody to figure out how to listen to a podcast because all the, the Apples and the Spotifys, didn't exist back then. But it's in a lot of ways, it's no different than promoting pretty much any property, especially media property. It takes consistent work. It can take you've been at 3 years. Congratulations, because most people don't last 3 months doing podcasting. So that is a large part of it. Self-promotion of the podcast, getting it out there. Certainly, your guests can be promoters or help you promote. As well. So making it as easy for people to share and promote is absolutely essential to today, I think. I will say this, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I tell people all the time, yes, I have a pretty large following now, or listener subscriber base, but I would do my podcast even if 10 people were listening, because of the conversations I get to have with people I want to have conversations with. And so I look at it as a very, it's sort of has a dual purpose for me. I look at it as networking as much as I do as promotion.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I could sustain my podcast for 3 years, because time to time when I look to numbers, I only look to the numbers when a guest asks for the number. Yeah. Some of the guests ask, and I'm just, okay, let me check. And I'm just like, checking it with like, quite getting scared about what am I going to see, because I don't check.
Well, the other thing you have to remember too is you're creating a lot of content, and a lot of content is very useful. And so certainly make sure that you're finding all the ways to repurpose and use that content that you're creating.
But I agree. I mean, like the connections that I built, some of them are my team members now.
Yeah.
They are working with me, they are working for me, or I'm working for them.
Yeah.
Or good friends, even. I'm with you on that. Did you use any ads to promote the podcast?
I have never done that. No.
You,
Yeah.
you've never done that, okay? Because
No.
some people say that there's a time that you should start doing
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
is it if it's like
I
a
don't think
must-have?
it's I don't think it's bad. I see a lot of people doing cross promotion too. So like 3 or 4 advertisers will promote each other's shows. I mean that can be a way that can be effective without having ad spend.
What is one business book you'd suggest listeners to read?
Oh, that's so hard for me because I think that there's value in lots of books that I've read. Recently, I went back and read. I had Jay Papasan on my podcast, and he and Gary Keller wrote the book "The One Thing." It's been around a long time, but it still sells hundreds of thousands of copies every year. And so that's, since you asked me that question, that's the one that I'll say today.
Yeah, that's an amazing book. I read it, I think, twice as well.
Yeah.
Where do you live, by the way?
Where do I live?
Yeah.
So I am in the mountains in the state of Colorado, west of Denver.
Oh, okay. So you should have a lot of snow.
We do have a fair amount of snow this time of year. It lasts till probably end of April.
Is there a favorite coffee place that you like to go over there? Because that's my last question to every guest.
So I'm in a pretty rural area, so I have to drive pretty far to get to one. But there are 2 coffee shops. One is in a little town of Nederland, Colorado. It's called the General Store. And then there's I live in a canyon, and just the bottom of the canyon, there's a really small coffee shop called Coal Creek Coffee.
I hope I can come over there and we can have a coffee at the second one, especially, which is like a smaller one.
Yep.
Thanks so much for joining me on this call. And I hope to meet you somewhere, either in Colorado or in New York soon. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.